Back in 2016, I saw this Instagram post, and when I saw it, I said to myself, that's all I need, and I'm going to work and save as much money as possible until I can leave my day job and I can spend all of it on exactly that. I'm going to buy as much land as possible and I am going to build whatever I can afford. And it turns out my dreams of 800 acres, well, that just wasn't going to be possible. I couldn't afford that. So instead, I settled on building a tiny home. And that's what it originally started as, was going to be just over a 30 square meter, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, super small home. However, at the time of recording this, and I've just finalized the 3rd edition of the plans of it, it's now 79 square meters, which is a little bit ridiculous, to be honest with you. And I agree with the comments that I've been reading recently, where I should probably change the title of this series because it's just not a tiny home anymore. So I think I might start calling it a cabin instead. Now, I do just want to say, throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing all of the costs because it always has annoyed me when people do not say how much things cost, because it's the most interesting part for me. If I want to actually build a tiny home, I want to know the best and worst case scenario of how broke I'm going to be by the end of it. And I don't mind admitting, this costs a lot more than I thought it would, even with me doing all of the work myself. For some reason I had a number in my mind and it just didn't get to that number, it just sailed way past it. So hopefully you can learn from some of my mistakes. Now this video is gonna jump in and out of voiceovers because I don't always like it when there's a voiceover going for the full video. Sometimes I like music, but there are things that I do kind of just have to say. Like right now, it's a warm deck roof. And if you don't know what that is, it means it's got a layer of insulation in the roof and that gives you an additional head height. So that's something to bear in mind when it comes to designing your tiny home. Always go for a warm deck roof. And in fact, I'll put on the screen right now the detail so you can just copy it. And I appreciate that some of you haven't done any building work, so I'm going to try my best to explain what's going on. So right now I'm cutting the openings for the skylights, and this was a very weird skylight setup that I've never done before, where it kind of blends into the wall on one side, and then especially on the bathroom, the marble tiles are going to be going all the way up from the shower tray all the way up to the glass, and you don't see that sort of thing very often. And now when it comes to skylights, always buy them off eBay. And I don't have any brand loyalty to any skylights, just pick the ones which have the multi-buy discount, and you can get between 10 and 15% discount the more you buy. And on the tiny home, I have 3 of them and they cost just over 300 quid each. Now don't ask why, but I bought double glazed skylights for the ceiling and triple glazed ones for the walls. Doesn't make sense. It should be the other way around. I made a mistake and it happens. And I'm not perfect. I messed up the EPDM. And if you're wondering, well, it looked pretty good in the video. Yeah, it's because I stopped recording because it was all going wrong, and recording a video and then gluing a roof is too much for my brain to handle. So I just stopped recording. And also, if I'm going to be really honest with you, I didn't want to show it because it looked bad. And I'm quite proud of some of the work I do. And then other bits is just way too sketchy. So I have to delete it out of the video. Now, that was the only help I had on this project, was lowering the skylights into place. And I got my brother to come and help do that. Everything else you see in this video is all me, be it the electrics, the plumbing, the lot. It is the first project I've ever done where I've literally done all of it myself. And I'm really proud of that because, well, for those of you who don't know, my brother and me have worked together for our entire life. I mean, this is me back in Normandy, France, which is where I grew up, helping my brother tile a kitchen. That's the first job I technically ever had, but I've had quite a few different jobs. I mean, I was a labourer for a long time, then an estate agent, worked for a civil engineering company for 2 weeks and then realised that I hated that. And then I did an apprenticeship scheme in finance and worked for a FTSE 100 asset manager for 6 years, and I hated it. 5 days into that job, I set a countdown on my phone that in 2023, no matter what financial position I'm going to be in, I will leave this job and I will build a cabin or a tiny home. And it is crazy how I stuck to that. Like every single meeting I was in, I was planning of how I would get out of this job. And the way I did that is it started with small little side hustles where I'd make a few £100 extra a month. And those side hustles, they grew into businesses. And before you know it, that small amount of money you're earning starts to overtake your salary from your day job. And that really is the best feeling I've ever experienced. It's an FU position. It means your manager says something you don't like, a colleague irritates you, and you suddenly just don't really react because you're like, I can just leave tomorrow and be free. And to me, yeah, that's what I consider success. Like sat here right now recording this video in the tiny home that you're seeing me build right now, I'm super proud of it. And yeah, sure, there's people out there with massive houses and that's what people aspire to be successful. And that's completely fine if that's what you want. But for me, like I said, this has always been the dream for me. All I ever wanted was a quiet life, and I wanted to own my house. I didn't want to rent because that's basically paying 100% interest. And then I didn't want to have a mortgage anymore because yes, it's less than rent, but it's still irritating, essentially renting money from a bank. I didn't want to do that. So this for me was my get out of jail free card, essentially, is I own all of this in cash. I'll put on the screen right now what this stage looks like when it's just a weatherproof shell. And what I mean by a weatherproof shell is it's got Tyvek house wrap on, which is a breathable membrane, so it lets moisture out of the structure but prevents moisture from going into it. And if you don't know why that is a big deal, well, water on OSB and 4x2 and any other wood, it will rot, and in 20 years time your house will fall down. So it's pretty important that you protect it from water. And then the EPDM on top, which just prevents any water getting into the building. Now this is an exciting stage of a project because you can kind of slow down a little bit. It's quite bad to leave a building open to the elements, and once it is a weatherproof shell, I can go on holiday because it's safe to the elements. And if you're looking at these windows right now going, they look familiar, is he putting skylights in the walls? The truth is, I saw a chalet in Verbier, France, and it must have been a £3-4 million chalet. And I saw them unloading skylights and putting them into the walls of the ground floor of the chalet. And when I saw that, it kind of broke my brain because I just thought about that client who's probably been told that he's getting these state-of-the-art windows that cost £1,001,000. And I know that they're just £300 skylights just going in the wall. So that kind of gave me the inspiration, but it was still scary. That's the only example I've ever seen. And now that I've been living in the tiny home for, well, at least 6 months, I can say that there are no leaks. And the fact that they're triple glazed also means that the tiny home is super warm. I currently only have underfloor heating in the bathroom, heating the entire tiny home. So that's only just over a meter squared of underfloor heating an entire 30 odd square meter tiny home, which is really surprising. And I think it might also have something to do with the fact that during the day I've got these 3 giant floor to ceiling windows that are sort of magnifying the sun and creating maybe a greenhouse effect, heating the home up. But I don't really know much about like science and stuff, so I could be completely wrong on that. Now what you're watching right now is the last time I wasn't in pain for a long time. Whilst I was creating a retaining wall, I missed the wooden stake and I hit my hand with a hammer. Now that's a bad situation, but I hit my metacarpal and I snapped it, and YouTube won't let me show the clip, and to be honest I wish I didn't have the clip of me doing it because it's disgusting. So what you're seeing right now is a jump of about 3 months from when I had a broken hand, and I'm still in quite a bit of pain doing this. And if you're wondering what this is, it's burning cedar, and that is to create a really cool effect on the wood, and that took a lot of time. You could only burn 3 pieces of cedar in one go because you have to make a chimney effect to create that level of heat that you can char the wood to get that really cool look. I'll put the name on the screen and the price of all of that cedar. Now cedar is probably one of the most expensive cladding materials you can get, and if you want a top tip on how to save money, buy all of your cedar from Wales and then just pay the delivery charge to get it down south, because yeah, if you're in London and you're doing like a cedar slatted fence, you're gonna need to take out another mortgage to do it. It's honestly insane. I don't even want to say what I'm doing in this clip because The coping that I needed would have cost a fortune, so instead I made my own coping, and it cost like 50 quid as opposed to like £700 or something insane like that. So I made my own one. It is so sketchy, but it looks great, and that is what the cedar is now slotting underneath, and that's how you get that really flush look at the top, is a piece of metal which bends over the top of it. At this point, I think it's really worth saying that the cedar cladding I think looks unbelievable. However, I massively underestimated the time it took to do, because remember, you're burning 3 pieces of wood at a time, and then installing it once it's burnt is a massive challenge, because, well, one, you're burning it, so that twists the wood, and then you add water to stop the fire, and then that also gets absorbed and twists it. So this took, I genuinely think it took me 7 days to do, which I'm sure there's people out there who could do it way quicker than me, but it just took me an insane amount of time. I also slipped with the saw and almost lost my thumb, and that's the left hand that I broke the metacarpal on. So that hand this year had a bad time, but we kept going, pushed through, and I was so happy with how it all turned out, because there was a lot of planning. Because when you're doing vertical cladding, you need to double the batten so that water can then go down the Tyvek instead of pooling on a horizontal batten, so that's why you double up the battens. And with that, it adds a lot of thickness, and then also adding 18mm of cedar to get it to slot perfectly underneath the glass of the skylight. That is a lot more planning than my brain usually can deal with. And the fact that I got it perfect on 4 windows is unbelievable. And that probably is my greatest achievement on the tiny home. Actually, the marble in the bathroom, because that really was something special. The fact that I managed to get it for the price I got it for, and the whole story of what actually happened when I decided that I wanted to save on the delivery fee by, well, putting the back seats down in the car and putting just over a ton worth of marble in the back of a car that definitely couldn't deal with that amount of weight in it. Yeah, it was a madness. But before we get onto that bit, I do just want to stop talking for a second and show more of like a real-time look of what actual building work looks like, because I'm part of the problem with all of this retention timeness that's going on. You see, I need you all to do me a favour, because I can't tell what I prefer, because 90% of the content I consume on YouTube is almost all voiceover. And I think the reason for that is that's what most people watch. But then I also like it where the person isn't talking. So I don't really know how I should balance it going forward on my channel. And speaking of my channel, I just want to say a massive thank you to every single person who has liked the videos and subscribed, because listen to this for some numbers, right? So it took 3 years to get 6,000 subscribers, and in 2024 alone, I gained 60,000 subscribers, which just doesn't even make sense. And I really, really do appreciate it, because all the ad revenue has now taken me from the red of being down £21,000 on this YouTube channel to now being up £8,500, which I just can't even believe. Like, that's paid for quite a lot of the materials of the tiny home, and it even paid for my new laptop, which, I mean, my old laptop, when I'd press export, it actually sounded like a jet engine starting up, and this new laptop, it edits videos where it would take 45 minutes, it now takes 2.5 minutes, so it's absolutely insane. So as I already said, massive thank you. Now back to the tiny home bathroom. Now, the whole idea for this tiny home was to make it feel like a small apartment and not just this really cramped house. So I custom made a lot of things specific to this setup, one of which was this layout, which you don't see very often, where the toilet is recessed back and then the boiler room is hidden behind the toilet, because that's the sort of thing you got to think about. Is you've got to have a hot water tank because you've got no loft space. It's just a single story building. You can't put the water tank in the roof and then have a gravity fed system, so you're going to need a pump. Now that's 200 quid in itself, and I'll put on the screen right now how much just the plumbing in materials alone cost for the tiny home. And that's something you've got to remember, is some of these costs, yeah, they're to do with the bathroom, but the hot water, the cold water, that's obviously all going to be going to the kitchen as well, for the dishwasher, the washing machine, sink and whatnot. And in actual fact, I'm going to shut up and let past Chris explain. This is a shower mixer. This is a cold water pipe, hot water pipe. The cold enters here, hot enters there. This is how you adjust the temperature in your shower, which actually is adjusting the mix of the cold water and the hot water. You press the start button and that allows the water to flow up this pipe and then all the way to the shower head up there. Now, plumbing, I can appreciate, is quite a daunting thing to do. However, there are products like SpeedFit which makes things a lot easier. If you don't know what that means, this is SpeedFit pipe, and these are 15mm inserts. You push the two together, and what that allows you to do is buy SpeedFit fittings like this 1/2 inch, which then will thread onto the top, and then all you need to do is push to fit. At this point, you might be wondering what this board is that I'm using, and it's called tile backer board, and you use it really for two reasons. One is its water resistant properties, and in a shower area, that's pretty crucial. And the other one is insulation, because this board in particular has 2 centimeters of foam, which when combined with the rock wool that is in the wall, it offers more than enough insulation. If you're wondering why you need insulation, well, condensation. You got a warm, damp bathroom mixed with the cold outside, the moisture in the air would condense on the tile, and that could create a ton of problems down the line. This is a trowel. This is also a trowel. The only difference is the notch size. You use a big notch for a big tile, small notch for small tiles. In order to cut through marble and porcelain, you need diamond blades. Why is it called a diamond blade? Because it's got tiny fragments of diamonds. This is 60 quid, this is like 10 quid. Some of them are for wet cutting with water, and others can be dry and wet. Sometimes you're going to need to cut tiles on an angle, so you need one of these to form the curves, and then you can just trace it with a pencil. In other areas, you need to figure out what angle you need to do a cut at, and therefore you use one of these. It literally costs 20 quid. 20 quid, 20 quid, 10 quid, 60 quid. It's not that much money for all the equipment you need to tile a bathroom, but what you do need to know is, well, how to do it. It's not really as bad as it seems, because all it really consists of is getting tile adhesive, back buttering each tile, and then applying tile adhesive like this onto the tile backer board to make sure that the tiles sit next to each other perfectly level and you don't have a ledge like this. Use a leveling kit. These are spacers, 1mm, you put it like that, next tile sits on top of it, you put one of these like this. Now, both the tiles are perfectly level. There is only one other thing you really need to know, and that is perfect preparation prevents disasters, genuinely. You need to think it all through and work out exactly where the cuts are all going to be before they're on the wall. You can see there, that is me drawing a line of where the top tile grout line is going to be going. The reason you do that is to make sure it doesn't go big tile, big tile, big tile, and then a sliver at the top, because, well, that doesn't look very good. Instead, you split the difference on the bottom tile and the top tile, so it looks more well laid out. Zwei, drei. So it needs to be 141 and we're getting 140 plus or minus 10%. So yeah, it's working. So now I can install this. Always do all your test fitting before the underfloor heating's down, because if a tile is pressing on your cable, it will basically break it. Now, I'm sure some of you might be wondering, wait, Chris, I thought you said these marble tiles were damaged, and they don't really look that damaged. And that's because the corners that are broken, I'm using them in the places where I have to make a cut. And therefore, the damaged piece is just going to get chucked in the bin anyway. So the end result, what you're looking at, is you can't tell that any of it was damaged. Now, this can become challenging if you're doing a really large bathroom and you need a load of tiles that are going next to each other, because then you're going to have to reformat all of the tiles, and that sounds like a lot of work. But beggars can't be choosers, and I would still do it for this amount of discount, okay? So it was £4,500 in perfect condition. But this pallet, 1 in 4 tiles, had a broken corner. So I used that to then haggle. He said a price, I said a price, and we ended up at £600. So that's a saving of 3,900 quid. And the end result is, well, you can't even slightly see any of the damage. It's funny editing all of this footage, because the amount of work that goes into making a video, I don't think anyone appreciates until they actually make a channel themselves. Like, the only way I could film all of this was by not building a stud wall, because if the wall was in front of the camera, well, you wouldn't see me doing any of the painting And then a camera on a tripod takes up almost the entire floor space in the bathroom. And as I was moving the 250 quid mirror, I tripped over the leg of the tripod and fell into the plasterboard, damaging the work that I had just done. But thankfully it didn't smash the mirror, because that would have been really irritating. The paint color that I'm using is magnolia for the walls and then matte white for the ceiling, which 90% of houses in the UK has this paint combination, and in a bathroom it works really well, and especially with this white marble, yeah, I'm super happy with it. And a piece of advice when it comes to decorating your house: put 10 times more effort into the preparation than you think you need to do, because as soon as you paint it, it magnifies all the imperfections. So always spend a few hours going around sanding, filling, and just making sure it's all perfect, because once you've painted it, it's quite hard to match the paint in and make it not look like you've just fixed something. So as you can see, this is the final look of the bathroom, and I put a lot of time into designing this so it actually all works. As you can see, the marbles going all the way up to the glass. That was difficult. Building up the plasterboard so it matches the tile backerboard, and then the tile adhesive and the tile. Yeah, that was fun. And the fixtures and fittings, they're all from Victorian plumbing, so they're probably the cheapest fixtures you can get, but they look great, all work perfectly. And then the tap that is on the sink, that's just from Amazon. And I really couldn't be happier with how this bathroom turned out. To me, it's perfect. And unfortunately, the enjoyment of seeing the bathroom all done didn't last very long, because I immediately had to start work on the new building, which cost quite a lot of money, as you're about to see. And the reason for building a new building is, well, I'm living in a tiny home, so I need to have my bedroom space, and then the bathroom, well, that's done, so you can't store any materials or tools in that room. So that leaves only 50% of the tiny home to store all of the materials, all of the tools, and all of my belongings, which leaves me with about 2 square meters to actually walk around. And when I need to plasterboard and plaster the tiny home, yeah, it's just not possible. So I had to build this new building, which again cost quite a lot of money, and it's a bigger building than I initially had planned for. And so this is where the costs started going up, because I've kind of got this mindset that if I'm gonna spend £1,000 on something, I might as well spend 1,500 quid on what I really want, and that was a workshop and an office. However, currently this new building is pretty much just being used as a storeroom, because the amount of materials that you need to then put into the tiny home, it's actually mad. And by the time you've got like a washing machine and a dishwasher, yeah, you need somewhere to put that, because you can't really leave it outside. I mean, you could, but if it breaks, I'd cry. So what you can see I'm doing right now is the foundation frame, and that is 3 pieces of 7x2 bolted together, and that creates this super strong structure that is then sat on pad stones, which are strong concrete blocks. There is another version of a foundation you can do, which is corkscrews going into the ground, but they cost so much, and because the soil here is so good, I was allowed to just use pad stones, which I'm pretty grateful for, because that saved a lot of money. Some of you might be looking at this thinking the timber looks very close to the ground, and that is true. However, you've got to remember that I'm building this all in stages, and 3 months after I built this building, I hired a mini excavator and I lowered the land all the way around this footprint, and especially where the garage is going to be, which if you look at the screen right now, where the wooden table is that's pushed into the hedge and the pull-up bar, that is actually a 6 meter by 3 meter space where I'm going to be putting a super modern garage. And then on the left hand side of the screen, that is going to be a vegetable patch planter. Now this building is not square. This particular side of the garden room is not at right angles, and the reason why is the plot of the tiny home is weird. It doesn't make any sense. It used to be an old road back a few hundred years ago, and because of that, it's just the weirdest shape. So I decided, instead of making the building square, I decided to kind of follow the lines of the boundary of the plot to try and make it fit into the space a little bit better. And also what you're going to see is this garden room is also a bit of an L shape, and that's because there's a really old holly tree on the right hand side of it, and I didn't want to cut it down. Well, I did want to, but I couldn't, because the environmentalist nerd people are like, oh no, you can't do that, there could be a badger living in the tree or something. So I decided I'd make a feature out of the holly tree. So I'm going to be having a window facing it, which I think will look quite nice. Now in this building, I'm going to be having 3 main windows. So there's going to be a 2.6 meter by 2 meter sliding door, and then a 1 meter 50 by 2.5 meter window facing the tiny home. And then there's the swivel window facing the holly tree, and then just a security door. It's going to be going on the left hand side. It should have cost just over 10 grand for all of the windows and doors, but instead it cost me £2,650, so a saving of 73%. And if you're wondering, Chris, how did you manage to do that? Well, you need to have a little read of newsletter number 41. And if you aren't aware, I have a weekly newsletter. Just click the link in the description or search Havesomevision on Substack and have a read. It's been a bestseller now for 11 months in a row, which is just insane, and I cannot thank everyone who reads it enough. It's ridiculous. In fact, all of this is a bit ridiculous. Like, I posted a video the other week of me explaining how much money I made from YouTube, and that video of me talking about how much money I made from YouTube made me like £400. It's so weird, this social media world. And not to tell you what to do, but at the same time, you right now have an iPhone, right? You have one, and you do things in your life. You might build bird boxes or vegetable patches or I don't know, whatever. Just set up your camera and record it, because I mean, if I hadn't have done that, I would be quite a few £1,000s worse off right now. And it takes a little bit of a risk, and I appreciate it's a bit of an uncomfortable thing at first being on camera. I get it. I've done it. Every single YouTuber I know, they don't really like it. It's a bit of a struggle for almost all of them. Some of them are bizarre people who just like love it, but the majority don't. They just do it because they know that, one, there is a business behind it, and then two, they go, well, this could actually help somebody, and it could give them some inspiration to realize, oh, do you know what? I can actually build a bathroom on my own. Build a tiny home. Oh, also, if you are wondering, Chris, how you've managed to get planning permission for the tiny home, just drop me a message on Instagram. About, oh my God, it's probably 2 years ago now, actually, at this point. I started to get tons of people interested in buying the information on how to build tiny homes in the UK. So I spent months writing a book, and then for the last year, I've been selling that book, and it explains everything that allowed myself and my clients to build tiny homes, gyms, workshops in areas they would never normally get planning permission. This information, it costs me thousands of pounds, but because I can sell it in quantities, I don't have to charge a ridiculous price for it. So if you are interested in buying this book, just send me a message on Instagram at Havesomevision, and I'll send it across to you. What you can see I'm doing right now is I'm adding all of the ceiling joists. And some of you might be thinking, Chris, it doesn't look like you've got all of the studs in the walls yet. And the reason for that is I ran out. So I'm gonna have to go back and add these studs into the wall to make it properly strong. But it was good enough for me to get on and put all the plywood on the roof and then add the EPDM. Now, if you don't know what EPDM is, it's basically a rubber roof. And a little trick to save a ton of money is go on eBay, search EPDM end of roll clearance, and basically these roofing companies, once they've done massive projects or whatever, there's usually some EPDM left over, and they can't really sell it at normal price because it's a bit of a random size. So as long as you can find a piece of EPDM that is a little bit bigger than your particular roof, it's a way you can save a ton of money. So for this entire EPDM roof and all of the glue, it cost me only £200, which is just nothing, and it is so quick to do. The best way to install it is rolling it around a waste pipe, but because this is an L shape and the holly tree is in the way, I can't obviously unroll it normally. So it was a bit of a pain, but I managed to do it just before it got dark. And British weather is the reason this project went so quickly, is because I only had a window of about 4 days before the weather really turned and it started getting a lot darker earlier in the evening. So the time you can actually be allowed to work on a building site gets cut massively short, and working in the rain, gluing plywood and stuff, being on a roof, I just didn't want to do it. I did that on the tiny home, and if you remember what happened on that roof, I still have scars on my hand from the damage that did to my hands. So yeah, lesson learned on that one. Now, just as a warning, this next part, just don't move windows and doors like I was. It's so dumb. Really, like, I'm being serious. Don't do it. If you have to, do it, but don't do it, because, I mean, this window here weighs 100 kilograms. Well, 98 kilograms. And this was okay to move, surprisingly. It was heavy, obviously, and you're trying to deal with the fact that it's constantly wanting to fall over. But, and also, it's not really a window, this. It's a door as well. Like, it's got this really cool mechanism, which I'll show in a future video. But this was the bad one. This is quite a tall sliding door. Every single one of these windows is triple glazed, and I can't explain to you. To get this window into place took 45 minutes, and you can see right now how heavy it is. Like, that is full force, all my strength, and I couldn't lift it. So the way I actually managed to move it was basically 1 centimeter at a time. I'm not even joking. It was so difficult, so dumb. Every muscle in my body is just broken, and the suction cup that I'm using kept slipping, and at one point it slipped completely off and I punched myself in the stomach, and for 4 days my stomach has been like, I can't even explain it. I think I punched myself in my stomach so hard that my organs were just like, nah, we're exiting. It was really weird. But this suction cup can hold 400 pounds, and this window's only 200 kilograms, which, wait, what's the conversion of pounds to kilograms? Right, let me just Google it. So 400 pounds is 181 kilograms. Right, so that's why it wasn't working, is because, yeah. So the window was 20 kilograms over the limit of the suction cup. Now, this work that you're watching right now is super simple and standard. It's just adding OSB, adding Tyvek breathable membrane, which allows moisture out of the structure, but then doesn't allow moisture into it. And if you didn't have it on your house and water did manage to find its way in, it would rot the OSB, rot the stud walls, and in 100 years, your house would definitely fall down. So it's super important to do it. It's really easy to do. You're just stapling it on. Now, when it comes to battens, there is a little bit of a rule with this. If you're doing horizontal cladding boards, you need to have vertical battens. Whereas if you're having vertical cladding boards, you need to have vertical battens and then horizontal battens on top of it. And the reason for that is if moisture is falling down the front of the Tyvek, if you didn't have those initial vertical battens, the water would just pool up on top of the battens and sit and rot all the battens out. So it's super important you have those vertical battens initially. Now, when it comes to the cladding, I had an idea. What if I used decking as the cladding material? Because if you buy decking, which is way thicker, it's treated, it will last forever, it only costs me £350 because you can haggle so easily on it, because most builders merchants are keeping so much of it in stock. And I wasn't exactly sure if I should leave it just the normal timber color, but I decided on matching it to the burnt cedar look of the tiny home, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. Now, the next day I woke up to a bit of a surprise. It snowed, which doesn't happen in England, and it put a bit of a pause on the progress of the new building because, well, I didn't really want to paint in the snow. So instead, I got on with tidying up the land and the internal work, because living in the tiny home with all the building materials wasn't that nice. There was quite a lot of dust, and I regularly was waking up at like 3 in the morning and I just couldn't breathe through my nose because of all the, I think it's the really fine insulation dust. So I bought a 60 quid air filter, and that really did a good job of cleaning all the air. And then also, when I finally moved all the materials out of the tiny home, that helped a lot, because I think all that dust was just hiding on everything. And this new building, I think it's 15 or 16 square meters. And now that I've moved everything out of the tiny home into this building, you can't even move around the new building. So I was right when I said it was literally half of the square meter of the tiny home I was just using to store all of the materials and tools that are needed to self-build a home. And this is something that needs to be considered, because yes, you've got to have the money for all the materials and the furnishings in the home, but you also need the money for the tools. Like you can see, there's a cement mixer, well, that's 100 quid, an impact driver, another 150 quid, a drill, a skill saw, a chop saw, a hedge trimmer, a router, a plane, an angle grinder, 75 tape measures, because you'll lose 74 of them in the process of building your home. I'm not even joking. I once bought 8 tape measures in one go, and I said there's no way I'll lose these, and now I've got 2. So I don't even understand how that's possible, but it will happen to you. So I would allocate at least 1,500 to 2 grand in stuff that you haven't even considered that you're going to need to buy. Like what you're looking at right now, that table, that was 80 quid. It's a lot. So like I said, 1,500 to 2 grand. You're gonna spend that on tools. But don't worry, it is one of those costs that once you've got it pretty much for life. Most tools don't break. And there isn't really a rule to it. It's not like if you spend a load of money that's going to be the best quality tool. In fact, some of the cheapest tools that I have lasted forever. So just buy what you can afford. And don't be too worried about trying DIY stuff. When you have to invest money in an idea, like say for example, you want to build a tiny home and then you have to spend 1,500 quid on tools, it's quite daunting, and I can completely appreciate that. It's like me when I started this YouTube channel. My first laptop couldn't deal with editing at all, so before I'd even made £1 from YouTube, I had to buy a new laptop, and that terrified me because you're actually putting money where your mouth is. You're trying something and you're investing money in a dream that maybe one day you might get monetized, and for me it took 2 years before I even got my first paycheck, and that first paycheck from YouTube was £7.50, and that might not seem like a lot of money, but it was proof of concept, and I spent it all on a coffee and a cake in Mallorca, and it was the best day ever. And I couldn't believe that I had just paid for food from filming myself build stuff. It's the best little business ever in my opinion, and I really hope it grows because I want to make more YouTube videos, and I'd quite like to scale back on my other business ventures and put a lot more effort into YouTube. Now, admittedly, that's impossible to do at this time of recording because if I give up the client work, well, in the last 4 years, I would have only earned £8,000 from YouTube. So that would have paid for the windows and the doors and the skylights of the tiny home and some of the insulation. So I appreciate people want like daily videos, but I can't do that at this stage because I can't give up the client work, if that makes sense. But hopefully if my channel continues to grow and maybe in the next 5 years I can start earning more money from YouTube, and then I can scale back my other ventures. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm planing down the plywood because whoever put these skylight upstands in kind of put them in at a bit of a skew. And that's really irritating when it comes to putting plasterboard around the skylights because it kicks it out and you don't want the plasterboard to be in at an angle. And some of you might be thinking, well, you've jumped quite a few steps. You didn't film putting rock wool in the walls, which if you don't know what that is, it's a type of insulation. And you also didn't film putting the plasterboard on the walls, which is 30mm insulation backed plasterboard, which costs so much money. And I'm glad I've got it because the tiny home's super warm. But I hate spending money on things you can't see. I mean, you feel the effects of having an insulated house, so I guess that is a benefit, and the fact that my electricity bill will be a lot lower. So there are good things, but I like spending money on windows and the cedar, but yeah, to put stuff into the wall, like the plumbing, the cables, the insulation, that stuff's just a boring expense to me. And I didn't film any of it because I hated doing it, because if you know, you know, rock wool insulation, it's not a fun time doing that stuff. It's now been almost a year that the charred cedar has been on the tiny home, and I always had this fear that the sort of charcoal nature of it, when it rains, that it'd just wash away, but it just doesn't. And also, if you wonder why people burn cedar, it's not just for the look, it's actually a technique of preserving it, so it will last a lot longer than if you just didn't fire treat it. Now, what you're watching right now is me building my temporary desk because, well, as I said, I'm full-time living in here and I work from here. And I have to admit, it's not brilliant at the moment. It's very temporary. There's not much space in the bedroom area, so the desk is taking up 80% of the hallway and it's super cramped. And the kitchen setup that I've got also isn't that brilliant. I've got a fridge freezer, I've got a microwave, I've got a barbecue outside and a washing machine which currently isn't plumbed in, so I'm always having to go to my friend's house to do the washing. So it's not brilliant, but at the same time I love it. Just being here and being able to live in something that you created entirely yourself is a pretty special feeling. And also these windows, because they're 2 meters 20 tall, and there's 4 of them, and then 3 skylights in the roof. What I've noticed is the lighting in this place is insane. Like, you do not really need to have any lights on, and I have run cables so I can put spotlights in the ceiling, so they are there ready for me to just drill a hole in the ceiling and pull the cable through and put spotlights. But I actually don't think I'm going to do that because, as you can see, it's super light during the day, and at night just that little lamp and the LED strip light, which is in the bathroom, provides more than enough light to walk around. I really do think the most surprising thing that you'll experience if you self-build a tiny home or a cabin or just renovate a terraced house or whatever is how much time you spend moving materials. Like moving this pallet in total took 35 minutes to move every single one from one side of the tiny home to the other. And the amount of time you're going to spend filling rubble sacks of rubbish, it really is surprising. And I think that is what can break people. It's not actually the work of just tiling, it's the clearing up every single day of how much rubbish you have. It is the planning of what materials you're going to need to make sure they're getting there all in time so you can actually put them into your house or onto your building. Because some things can take quite a long time to arrive, like for example the windows, and I appreciate everyone wants me to just click my fingers and then the tiny home is just done. You get your rush of watching a project in 5 minutes, but that's not how it works. This isn't like a written show, it's just me building my dream. And 4 years ago when I started this YouTube channel, that was the whole plan for it, is I'm going to film what I want to film, and therefore it won't ever feel like work. And that's something that I recommend any of you who want to start a YouTube channel, is you make the channel about what you are doing in your life, and therefore it's not super difficult to come up with video ideas because you're just filming what you get up to. It's like right now I'm cutting all of the hedge back so that I can prepare for 2025, which is when I'm going to be doing a lot of the landscaping. So this area you're looking at right now is going to become a courtyard with a barbecue, a seating area, and then a walkway which cuts through to where the garage is going to be. So I've got two routes, one on the left hand side of the new building that you're looking at and one on the right hand side. And if you're wondering, Chris, why haven't you finished doing the cladding on that wall? Well, that is because I'm still waiting to hear back on an offer I made for the biggest window I have ever bought, and the only way I can get it into place is by removing the Tyvek on the right hand side of that building, taking that piece of OSB off and then pushing the window through that side of the building. So I literally have to dismantle part of the house. I'm pretty dumb for trying to buy this window, but when it's in there, I think it's going to be great. But to be honest with you, I'm a little bit terrified to add up how much I've spent on windows and doors, because that's the thing. I've got steel doors that are like heavy duty security ones, and those alone on this project have been £1,000. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 skylights. They gave me one for free because one of them arrived with a screw going through the front pane of glass. And then I've got the giant window that you see on the new building, the sliding doors, the central pivot window, and then with this 2.5 meter by 1.5 meter window that's going to be going on the connecting hallway between these two buildings. Yeah, it's adding up to quite a lot. When it comes to plasterboarding your house, all you really need to know is there's like normal plasterboard, then there's moisture resistant plasterboard, which needs to go in your bathroom, or I like to use it around the skylights because depending on the humidity in your area, the water in the air can condense up there, and if that's landing on just normal plasterboard, yeah, it's not good. So I always put moisture resistant plasterboard around skylights, and the type of plasterboard that I'm using is called taper edged plasterboard. And what's important about that is you do not need to plaster it. In the UK, everyone gets their houses plastered, but in France, and I think they do it a lot in America as well, is you just tape it. So what you can see in the boards on the wall and on the ceiling is the edge is tapered, so you can then fill that with plaster. Then you put this thin piece of paper onto that join, and then after 3 coats of plastering it, you've essentially kind of created your own plasterboard over the join. And as someone who has plastered a house and has also taped and plastered a house, this is probably 1,000,000 times easier than plastering. And in fact, if there's any plasterers watching right now, you should all probably just like add £1,000 to your next quote, because everyone is going to pay it because they're just not going to do it themselves. Plastering, this isn't my opinion, you go do it. It is a little bit of like an art form, because you can tell if someone's good at it and you can really tell if someone's bad at it. So what you're looking at right now is the full final plans of the tiny home. That is the tiny home on the left, the entrance hallway, which is also going to be a mudroom to store coats, shoes, wood and whatnot. And then there's the new building, a garage and a vegetable patch. And in 2025, I've got quite a lot to be getting on with. I need to finish plastering, sanding, painting the living room, and then the bedroom area needs sorting. The final 5% of the bathroom needs to get done. And then there's the new building, and then all the concrete work for the vegetable patch, and then the hallway, and then the landscaping. It's a lot, but I love this stuff. And looking back over this video, and then looking back over the last 10 years that it took to get to this point, when I failed school and had to redo the same year twice, how a small little accountancy firm with 5 employees, after my first interview, said that I lacked the intelligence academically to work for them. Yet a FTSE 100 company that managed $500 billion was like, yeah, you're pretty switched on for your age. Come work in institutional fixed income. It's mad. And as someone who's actually, I get it, it might not be your dream, what you've just watched, but for me it was. And the process of creating any dream, no matter what level it is all very similar. The only thing that has worked is consistent turning up for yourself. It doesn't matter how you feel, just try and do at least 30 minutes work on whatever project you have. I'm not just talking about a renovation. It could be that you've got a business idea you've been wanting to do for the last 3 years and you've done nothing. And if you had started those years ago, well, who knows where you could be right now. So as I said to myself back in 2016, enough is enough, no more excuses. Just start making small, consistent progress. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, check out my weekly newsletter where I basically talk about everything that it took to go from where I hated my life to now loving it. And if it's not too much to ask, if you could share this video with one friend, it would just instantly double its exposure. So it'd really help me out and help me pay for the massive bill, which is all of these windows. It's ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to put on the screen right now the entire cost of the tiny home and the new building and the private gates, the soak away, etc. And on that note, if you remember back to the start, I was going to say something. Well, here's me saying it. I think that this and the tiny home is a dream that quite a lot of people have, that they just think that if they can buy some land and build a tiny home or a cabin in the woods, that overnight their life just becomes better and that they'll be happy and have no stress. And as someone who's actually done it, it's been now 2 years since I quit my 9-to-5 and left London for the countryside, I can honestly say it is everything and a lot more than I thought it would be. Like, this is a Monday morning. I used to be stood like a sardine on the Northern Line, going to somewhere that I don't want to be. Whereas now it's just like I aimlessly wander around, and then by the time I get back, I have a coffee and I go, what do I want to do today? Rather than, what do I have to do today? I think that's the richest thing, is being able to be free to do what you want. So if this is something that you want, it is 100% worth it, and all the effort and the mental battle to keep going when you're so delusional with your dream and it looks so impossible. Just know that it is 100% worth it, and that the only regret you'll have is that you didn't work harder so you could get here sooner. Because this completely changed my life. Like, all the years in London, time seemed to fly because you're just so distracted all the time because it's so fast paced. Whereas out here, I swear, 2 months in the countryside is a year in London. Like, everything's just slow motion. Yeah, that really is the only regret I have, is that I didn't start sooner. Yeah. I think that's it.